Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Zane, and I'm 27 years old, and I'm currently trying to build to $100,000 invested before I turn 30. Today, we're going to do a first for the channel, which is a financial reset for the month of August. We're going to take a look at everything that I spent in July, where we could have maybe done better, and how we can set ourselves up for a lot of success moving forward into August. It's always nice to keep tabs on what you're spending month over month, just so you can kind of see your areas that maybe need improvement, areas that you're doing well in, and what can just overall have a better job. It's important to give every dollar a purpose, so that way, moving forward, it knows what to do and how to work best for you. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the budget sheet that helps keep me accountable and what I do every single month to stay on top of my finances. Welcome to my budget sheet. I know I've alluded to it a few times on the channel so far, and there's just a lot to go through in all honesty, so I knew it was going to be a longer format video. So I hope you're able to get comfortable and join me as I take you through my finances and just kind of walk you through what it looks like on an average month for myself. I know I've been sharing that the past few months have been anything but average given all of the life changes, such as getting married, moving to a new state, and going on a honeymoon. Everything was wonderful, and now we're still sort of playing catch up on a few of those things, as you guys will see when we run through it. But I think the first place to start when trying to play catch up is actually going to be keeping track and keeping a good, eye on all of your finances, so that way you know where it is that you need to build upon to set yourself up for further success. So without further ado, this is my budget sheet. It works very simply. I know it looks like a lot, but I like to be able to see things at a quick glance, so that way it's just all there in front of me. I don't have to dig around for it or guess. There is a lot of manual components to this, but there's also a lot of automation to keep things in line, so to speak. So for starters, over here on the left side, under bank accounts, it's going to list out all of the bank accounts that my wife and I have. With the exception, hers are not on here yet. We just haven't added them in, but shortly enough they will be added in. So the way that my wife and I do finances, and this is for anybody that's married or engaged or thinking about getting married, this is just what works for us. It doesn't mean that, it's the correct way by any means, because, personal finances is personal at the end of the day. Kicking things off, we divvy up our money into three sort of distinct ways. I maintain my own personal checking and savings account, and she does as well. But we also have a joint account. This is where our paychecks are deposited into. It just sort of makes tracking a whole heck of a lot easier, as well as, really maintaining just organization when it comes to our finances. So as you can see, my checking and savings account is on here. A lot of money has been moving around recently. This isn't typically a representation of how much I like to keep in each account, as well as our savings account. Clearly we are still building to a, amount that we're both comfortable with, which I think I've shared before, but $25,000 is our goal amount to have saved in an emergency fund. Anything in excess of that is for other goals that we have personally. So the main reason that we think that this format works best for us is because we have shared expenses. And working our way through the various accounts that we have, having it go into one consolidated account and then moving it to our separate individual accounts is much easier than trying to have it come into our personal accounts, Venmoing, sending it to a different account, paying bills off on different cards with different accounts. It just gets really messy really quickly. So if we're able to, consolidate as much of that as we possibly can in a joint account, that's the option we're going to opt in for. So that's just a brief synopsis of our bank accounts and our current liquid net worth, and that word will come into play a little bit later, as you guys will see. And then moving on over, we have our investments, where how much we're allocating each month to a particular type of investment account. As of right now, you can see it's just my 401k listed, as well as my HSA, my Roth, and then my individual brokerage account. Some of the caveats to that, as I mentioned, my wife and I, we just moved to Colorado. I'm able to work remotely from home. She, unfortunately, is not in her line of work, so it's taken her a little over a month to get situated here in Colorado. Fortunately, she did land a job relatively quickly, but we just haven't seen her paychecks yet, as her start date was the beginning of this month. So throughout the month of August, we'll be keeping tabs on that, and these numbers will change in the next financial update that I give you guys. And so then moving on to income streams, following that note, it's just going to be my income listed as well as my refereeing income that I've shared with you guys. In California, the numbers varied a little bit just because I knew the schedulers and what they were looking for in terms of people to fill certain games. Here, it's a little bit of a learning curve still, and still trying to get acquainted with some of the schedulers here. So while it's entirely dependent upon my schedule and how much I'm willing to work, it's also a little bit dependent upon how many games are available and if that scheduler is comfortable with me taking over a lot of the games. As the youth season picks back up in the fall here, we're going to start to see maybe an increase in just how much I make month over month with reffing. So clearly that's was a pretty good month in July. I brought in $635 from reffing, and from my job, I brought in $4,874.34. So as you can see in this note that I pulled up here, based off the last video I shared with you guys, I got promoted at the beginning of the month. So my pay went from $65,000 to $85,000, which was really exciting. It was a long time coming, if I'm being quite honest, and it's just nice to have the recognition now, and I'm super grateful for the opportunity. And I'm also grateful for the pay increase that I'm going to be seeing over time. So in August, we'll give you guys a better update as far as what that's looking like, because I'm still have yet to see what each paycheck is going to come out to be. Moving on over into the next category, I have my fixed expenses. These are going to consist of expenses that are reoccurring every single month without fail, whether we love it or not. First one being rent. We love where we live. We don't love how expensive it can be. I think that would just apply to just about anywhere that we ended up, in all honesty. So $24.11 is the rent amount that we're responsible for before any utilities are calculated in. And then we have pet insurance. We have one dog. He's going to cost us $173 with his pet insurance. His grooming comes out to about $75 every single month, on the exception that he needs a haircut, which is about every 3, maybe 4 months, just depending upon his coat. That will then bump it up to about $130 if we're using rough estimates from what we paid the last time. The next fixed expense is going to be our auto and renter's insurance. Pretty standard stuff here if you guys own a car or if you guys rent an apartment. It's just one of those things that unfortunately you need to have. And then our phone and internet, again, things that we need to go about our day-to-day lives, so to speak. And so carrying into that similar note, in terms of just sort of living expenses, we have variable expenses. I like to make this a little bit easier on myself. Variable meaning we just don't know exactly what it's going to come out to every single month. Grocery, this is kind of a test to just sort of see month over month if this is enough or if it's too much. And that's where you guys will start to see when we get into the current expenses section of this budget tab. But my grocery bill, we budget it for about $500. We go to Costco maybe once every 2 weeks, maybe a little bit sooner, depending upon what it is that we're just low on. Our biggest expense is typically going to be any type of protein, so like chicken, beef, fish, you name it. Dining, we gave ourselves $200. We don't go out to eat a ton. We like to consider ourselves pretty good cooks, and we're happy with the food that we cook, and it also just kind of helps save money on, going out to eat, because that can be really expensive nowadays, especially for just 2 people. And so carrying on over from rent being a fixed expense, what is not is our utilities. Those just vary month over month, depending upon the usage, of course. I'm sure I don't need to dive into when it's warm, how much you may love air conditioning. And between our electricity bill and our con service bill, which is billed by the apartment, but it is a variable expense because we don't know how much sewer, how much water, how much, trash is going to come out to be. We are responsible for all of those utilities. And so, all in all, we budget about $300 for utilities. So, if you had to give a figure to just our living expenses, it would be roughly $2,700. Granted, it could come in a little bit lower, which is always a delight to see. However, we are estimating just $150 just to be safe. And then transportation, we put aside $100 just because we don't do all too much driving. Our commutes are pretty small. Mine, virtually nothing. I work from home. My wife, though, sure, her commute is relatively close by. So we don't anticipate spending too much money in gas and other automotive repairs. So $100 works well for us. And then the miscellaneous is just meant to capture anything and everything that falls into any of the categories listed above. So say in that given month, we have to take our dog in for grooming, or we have to take him to the vet for whatever reason. Miscellaneous would most likely cover that because it's not a fixed expense. It's just something that may occur within a given period of time. And so that carries us over into the current expenses table that I have listed out here. These are going to be monthly categories just to kind of keep record of what it is that we're spending in a month over the course of a year. And same can be said in the income streams table, just to sort of have record of how much we brought in and see if there's a trend that's moving upward, downward, staying stagnant. It's no big deal, but it's just meant to be tracked so that we have record of it. And so in the month of July, which we're going to be going over in more detail shortly, we've ran ourselves at about $5,172.88. There's a few expenses that aren't calculated into this total, and those expenses were just sort of unrelated to what we would spend in an actual month. And I know that's kind of cliche because there's always going to be that type of spend. However, we like to think that this was a little bit more nuanced, given that we had to register our vehicles in our new state. We had to get new driver's licenses, and then going back to our wedding, we had to pay for an SSD to store our photos permanently so that way we don't lose them. So those were one-time costs that were a little bit higher than normal, and I did keep track of them. I think it ran us at about $1,124. So again, if you were to tack that onto July, we would be at almost $6,200, if not a little bit over. But that, again, is not entirely accurate to what we spend in a month. So that's what this chart is basically limiting to. And again, when we go into the expenses tab, you guys will see what I'm talking about. Moving on down into the last few tables that we have here, it's going to be our debt. This is where we have a consolidated view of what we have spent on each credit card. So as you can see, we have 4 main credit cards that we cycle through. Each one has its own purpose and reason. I can definitely dive more into credit cards and how I use them specifically in another video. If that's something of interest, just comment down below credit card and I'll get the hint that maybe I should make a video about that. But the Chase cards are going to be our 2 main cards of source, just those are what we frequent. The Apple card is purely just to pay for some lovely iCloud storage that seems to always run out of space no matter how much space you do have. And then Built is not a card that we would prefer to have at the moment. It was great initially when I was living on my own and was able to sort of earn Built points before they changed up their entire ecosystem. However, now our apartment somewhat requires us to use Built. Obviously, we don't have to have an account or a credit card associated with it to pay our rent, but because I've already had the account and the credit card, it was easy to just keep the no-fee card open, and that's how we pay our rent. And then net worth, probably one of the more exciting features of this tab is to kind of detail what it is that we have of net worth every single month and every time we plug in new expenses. And then we break it into 2 different types of net worth. We have our liquid net worth, which I mentioned earlier, and then we have our total net worth. The liquid net worth is just going to be what's comprised of our checking and savings. It's what we can access, today if we really needed to, or tomorrow. Investments are not liquid. I don't want to ever really look at them as liquid, because then it becomes a sticky game of, I really shouldn't be trying to sell my investments that I'm holding for long term, just because there's the tax implications, of course, but also they're better off staying inside the investment account, so that way they can grow with, compounding interest over time. If I'm constantly pulling them out, putting them back in, I don't feel like they're growing properly. So it just makes me feel more comfortable, personally, if I don't calculate that into my liquid net worth, whether it's a retirement account or my individual brokerage account. So this liquid net worth, we're at about $14,000, which again doesn't account for my wife's bank account because we haven't plugged that in yet. And then our total net worth is just shy of $50,000. So again, we're close to the halfway milestone of just having $100,000 net worth, but we're quite a way away from the overall goal, which is $100,000 invested. So those are two very distinct things. Both are very, achievable and exciting goals, but we're definitely looking forward to crossing that $50,000 threshold first, and then continuing to make our way up to 100. So that is an overview of my budget sheet. The areas where it gets a little bit more interesting is going back to our current expenses. These are not just random numbers based off of what I think I spent in the given month. These are actually formulas pulling from this expense input tab. And this here is where we can kind of see what we spent in the month of July, where we could have done better, and how we're going to be better moving forward. So the categories are what we went over in the other table. They're just all consolidated into one table now. And it gives you roughly the budget that we give ourselves month over month, which is $5,249. You'll see here I put $6,000. It's mostly just to be a buffer for anything that, may fall even outside of the variable expenses that I went over. Again, this isn't our income month over month. It's actually a little bit higher. So anything beyond $6,000 is basically looked at as some form of savings. And that is something that we're still working out, because we haven't seen a full month of what it's like to be dual income. So what's exciting is you guys get to be along with us as we continue to figure out this stage of our life. And so taking a closer look at this, categories legend, so to speak, is what I've called it. We have the rent, of course, so what we budgeted, what we actually spent, and then the delta between those two amounts. So as you can see, we spent exactly what we accounted for in terms of rent. We spent exactly what we accounted for in terms of investments. Fixed expenses is where it started to dip into the red zone. The reason for that is in this July expense table. This was the first month that I've started tracking for both my wife and I, but I also rolled over some of June's expenses, just because the way that we signed up for certain programs and then the day that they actually fell on for billing, we were taking care of May, and so I just pushed it to July. So that's why it's over. I know exactly some of the costs that pushed us to that limit. One of them being our dog. He needed both grooming, but he also needed a haircut. So that was one of the unforeseeable expenses that we had at the moment before we fully fleshed out this variable expenses category. So a lot of it was work in progress, but that's the reason for the overage. And then grocery, it looks like we underspent by almost half the budget. However, we did not only spend $30 or $225 on groceries. We actually spent a little bit more. As part of the lease that we signed for this current apartment, we got a $2,000 gift card. The $2,000 has not just been spent on groceries. It's been spent across various, expenses. One of the ones being our couch, our, appliances inside the home, various just sort of household items that we may have needed. But in addition to that, groceries. So I know for sure we've been to Costco a handful of times since being established here, and we've spent probably like $150 each month on, grocery expenses. So those aren't fully calculated, and again, the month of August will give us a better picture of our month over month grocery spend, but just wanted to give that note as to why it looks like we saved so much money in groceries when we really did not. Going over utilities, again, we budgeted a little bit higher than we would anticipate, $300 in total for everything. We spent $254.33 for the month of June, which is really great because, again, having that buffer sort of acts like a cushion, and it makes us just feel a little bit better that, hey, we didn't spend the full amount that we budgeted for, because although some of these, they need to be spent up to the dollar exactly, some of them do not. And it would always be better to take some savings back than, have to pay extra. Dining, again, I think we covered this, but in case we didn't, $200 is our budget. We spent $408.14. On that same note of not every month is going to be perfect, and there's always going to be unexpected costs. There is one that was pushed from the end of June, early July, that is not typically spent on our dining budget. We spent almost $150 eating out at sushi to celebrate my promotion. So that was something that, again, we knew wasn't going to be a part of this budget, but it's inside of the expense input tab, just so that way we're able to reference historically what we spent and where every single dollar went. Because even though we may not like the story of the dollar or the job that the dollar had, at least we know where and why it occurred in such a manner. So that is really the most impactful areas of overspend that we could probably work on. Dining is one of those ones where it's easy to cut back on, but it's also hard to, really kind of set that limit hard for yourselves, because sometimes you do want to treat yourself to a nice, dinner, whatever it may be, but sometimes it goes a little bit over. And then our variable expenses, you can see here that we've calculated just enough cushion at $17.32 to kind of capture everything that fell underneath that umbrella. And then transportation, again, just because I have been the one that's been driving and my car is electric for the most part, it's plug-in hybrid, and my wife hadn't started her commuting until early this month. We don't know what transportation is going to fully look like month over month, so we just gave ourselves $100. It seemed appropriate based off of the cost of gas per gallon in our local area and how far my wife's commute is, and just about how far all of the stores are from us, in case I'm the one doing the driving and I run out of battery for electricity. So I just blacked out these two tabs, mostly just for privacy reasons. I hope you guys can understand. But in here, it lists out every single expense charged to a credit card, a debit card, just wherever it came out of, just so that we're able to go back and keep track of how much we're spending in a month, where that money's being spent, and how we can do better. What's also really nice is I'm able to filter these by just dragging over right here. And then you can see here that if I really wanted to, we'll go back to that if I really wanted to see the categories on how much we spent, I would just filter by dining, and in here it's going to itemize all of the charges that we saw. And that's a really nice feature about this budget sheet that I put together, is that it's able to work in your best interest by showing you the categories that you've overspent in and seeing how and where you can improve. As you can see, we do a lot of small charges that add up to a fairly large amount, rather than a bunch of big charges that are like, okay, you guys need to, really, live within your means. And this is what I'm saying, like, we'll probably stop and get a pizza. We'll maybe grab some burgers or sandwiches. Maybe this was, a dinner of some kind. And so that's how we sort of best keep track of what we're doing every single month with our money. And last but not least, I just wanted to go ahead and show you guys some of the other tabs. So again, this expense input tab that we just went over is going to be something that can be duplicated every single month. So as you can tell, for the month of August, I already have a chart going. I don't want to click into it just yet because I haven't covered up some of the vendor and the notes that I have put inside there right now. And then our investment tracker, this is meant to just sort of see our linear progression of our investments over time, As you can see, it starts in July and goes through December, which is the second half of the financial year, is how I break it up. And the reason the Vanguard and the HSA are highlighted is because those take a little bit longer to post, as you can tell by the day I'm posting this video, which is August 4th of 2026. I haven't seen what my final paycheck for the month of August actually deposited into my Vanguard account, so I don't want to put a incorrect number. And the same could be said with my HSA. That one I gave a sort of estimate because it doesn't fluctuate all too much. If my budget sheet is of help to you, or you find yourselves interested in tracking the same way that I do, I can go ahead and throw this down in the comment section for anybody that would like it. Just feel free to reach out to me, and I can share a copy or a link with you guys that you can start tracking on your own. And I'd love to hear the progress that you guys are making throughout your financial journey. And again, if there's anything that I can teach you guys, it's to always track where your money goes, because it's easy for it to get lost in the shuffle of day-to-day life. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one, and thank you guys for watching.